In my video about learning languages, I spoke about how context is king, but actually that's not just true for learning languages. That's also true for learning anything. For example, if I said to you, let's use zone D to force a turnover and then huck it to our coach, you might be thinking to yourself, what does that mean? There's probably several words there and maybe even some concepts that you're not familiar with. But your inability to understand is not necessarily because you're dumb. It's because I use words that apply to a specific context that many of you don't know. Now, if I explained these words and concepts to you, you'd have a better chance at following the conversation. In this case, I'm talking about the sport of ultimate frisbee and the actions that my team will take on the next play. Zone D means zone defense, where players guard an area instead of a person. A turnover means one team loses the frisbee and the opposing team gains it. A huck is a really long frisbee throw. A cutter is someone who focuses on running and catching during the game. With these terms explained to you, you now have context for the situation, and you can thus follow the conversation. You might be thinking, oh, well, that's obvious. You just explained to me things that I don't know so that I can understand. Yeah, exactly. If you learn the things that you don't know, then you will be able to understand. Oftentimes when we can't understand something, we take it personally, as if it's an attack to our ego or our intelligence. We tend to tune out and lose interest. And it happens all the time. Perhaps you just got a new job and people are using job-specific words and abbreviations that you haven't had time to familiarize yourself with. Perhaps it's a subject in school where you don't have any background on what the teacher is talking about. In all cases, if you better knew the context, then you'd be able to follow along. If you can't understand the things that your doctor says to you at your medical appointment, it doesn't mean that you're just a big dummy. It just means you don't have the background in these fields. And if you put in the time to study these a little bit, read some books, watch some podcasts, you'd probably be able to follow along at least a little bit. That's something important for all of us to keep in mind. If there's something you want to know more about but don't really understand, it just means that you need to learn more context. Review the fundamentals and go over the basics. Test yourself to find out where you're weak on. Review real-world examples until you're able to put the pieces together and see the pattern. And if you're talking to someone and they don't understand, it doesn't mean that they're too stupid. It means that they don't have enough context. Tell them the context. Help them by explaining it to them properly and without judgment. Maybe it's just one word, or they've never played the sport before, or they aren't familiar with winter terms because they've never lived in an area that snowed before. Maybe it's a hard subject in school and their fundamentals just aren't that good. Maybe they're new to the job and are still learning everything. Try not to be that judgmental and just help them out. Just understand that you've also been in those situations, and rather than hold it against them, try to help them out. Explain to them the context that they are missing. Of course, intelligence does play a role. A smarter person needs a little bit less context in order to understand something. For example, in order to understand thing A, a smart person might need 10 pieces of information, but a normal person might need 15 pieces of information. But that doesn't mean that only smart people can understand it. It just means that they get there a little bit faster and with less effort. Don't let yourself feel limited by your intelligence. And don't let yourself feel left out of a friend group just because you're not familiar with the subject they're talking about. And don't judge yourself by other people's experiences because their background and context are different than yours. If there's something you don't understand, it's rarely due to your lack of intelligence and more due to your lack of context. So the solution is simple. Acquire more context.